The halls of Toronto's Etobicoke School of the Arts echoed with the usual chaos of teenagers rushing between classes. Among them, a lanky 15-year-old with shaggy dark hair kept his head down, trying to blend into the background. This was Keanu Reeves' fourth high school in 5 years, and he was getting tired of being the new kid. "Hey, watch it!" someone yelled as Keanu accidentally bumped into them, his armful of books tumbling to the floor. Papers scattered across the polished linoleum while students stepped around or over them, barely noticing. Keanu knelt down, gathering his things with practiced resignation. This was nothing new. He'd always felt like he was taking up space that wasn't meant for him. Need a hand? Keanu looked up to see an older man with kind eyes and a tweed jacket that had seen better days. Mr. Thomas Bennett, the drama teacher, squatted down beside him and began collecting papers. "Thanks," Keanu muttered, embarrassed. "Keanu Reeves, right? You're new this semester?" Bennett handed him a stack of crumpled worksheets. "Yeah." Keanu avoided eye contact, shoving papers haphazardly into his backpack. Bennett noticed the assignment on top, a reading comprehension worksheet covered in red marks and a large "See Me" scrawled across the top. "Mrs. Winters can be tough," Bennett said, nodding at the paper. "Don't let it get to you." Keanu shrugged. "It's not just her. I'm not very good at, school stuff." The bell rang, signaling the start of the next period. Students hurried past them with increased urgency. "You're late for something?" Bennett asked. "English. With Mrs. Winters, actually." Keanu grimaced. "She's gonna kill me." Bennett pulled a small notepad from his pocket, scribbled something, and tore off the page. "Here, a hall pass. Tell her you were helping me with something." Keanu took the note, surprised by this unexpected kindness. "Thanks, Mr. Bennett, Thomas Bennett, Drama Department." He stood up and straightened his jacket. "Actually, we're holding auditions for Romeo and Juliet this afternoon. You should come by." Keanu almost laughed. "Me? I can barely read out loud without messing up." "Acting isn't just about reading words on a page," Bennett replied. "It's about understanding people. Give it a shot. Room 116 after school." Before Keanu could protest further, Bennett was already walking away, leaving him standing alone in the emptying hallway, late pass in hand. Later that day, to his own surprise, Keanu found himself standing outside room 116. Through the small window in the door, he could see about 20 students sitting in a circle on the floor while Bennett paced energetically, gesturing with his hands as he spoke. Keanu almost turned to leave when Bennett spotted him and waved him in. "Everyone, this is Keanu. He'll be joining us today." Bennett motioned for him to take a seat in the circle. For the next hour, Keanu watched as students performed short monologues. Some were clearly experienced, throwing themselves into characters with confidence. Others were more hesitant, but encouraged by Bennett's patient guidance. "Keanu, would you like to try?" Bennett finally asked. "I didn't prepare anything," Keanu said, his heart racing at the thought of performing. "That's all right. We'll try something different." Bennett handed him a few. "P.S. This is Mercutio's Queen Mab speech. Just read through it silently first." Keanu stared at the page, the words swimming before his eyes. The familiar panic began rising in his chest, the same feeling he got every time a teacher called on him to read aloud. His palms grew sweaty as he tried to make sense of the text, but the words jumbled together stubbornly. After a few minutes of struggle, he looked up to find Bennett watching him thoughtfully. "Having trouble?" Bennett asked quietly. Keanu nodded, shame burning his cheeks. The words, "They don't stay put." Instead of the disappointment or impatience Keanu expected, Bennett simply nodded. "I thought so. Come see me after everyone leaves." For the remainder of the audition, Keanu sat quietly, both relieved and confused. When the last student had gone, Bennett closed the door and pulled up a chair across from him. "Have you ever been tested for dyslexia, Keanu?" "What's that?" "It's a learning difference that can make reading difficult. The letters might seem to move around or flip, words get jumbled. Does that sound familiar?" Keanu felt something shift inside him, a tiny recognition that perhaps there was a reason for his struggles, something beyond just being stupid, as he'd been called by frustrated Teachers. Yeah, he admitted. All the time. I have to read things like 5 times to understand them. Bennett nodded. I noticed how you were holding the paper, the way your eyes moved. I've worked with several students with dyslexia. So I'm broken? Keanu asked bluntly. Not at all, Bennett laughed. Your brain just processes information differently. Actually, many creative people have dyslexia. It can be a gift in some ways. Doesn't feel like a gift when I'm failing English. Fair enough, Bennett conceded. But here's what I've noticed. People with dyslexia often develop incredible skills in other areas. They become excellent observers of nonverbal cues. They pick up on things others miss because they've had to find alternative ways to understand the world. Keanu considered this. It was true that he'd always been good at reading people's expressions, at sensing the unspoken tensions in a room. It was how he'd survived so many school transfers. That's why I think you might be good at acting, Bennett continued. You've already been doing it in a way, watching how people move, how they express emotions, then adapting your own behavior accordingly. For the first time that day, Keanu felt a flicker of interest. So how would that work? With the reading and everything? We adapt, Bennett said simply. I can record the lines for you to listen to. We can work on memorization techniques that don't rely heavily on reading. There are ways, Keanu. Why would you do all that for me? You don't even know me. Bennett leaned back in his chair. When I was about your age, I had a teacher who saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She changed the course of my life. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person who believes in you when you don't believe in yourself. The next day, Keanu returned to the drama room during lunch. Bennett was there, eating a sandwich at his desk while grading papers. I'd like to try, Keanu said without preamble. For the play. Bennett smiled. Excellent. I was hoping you'd say that. He pushed aside his lunch and pulled out a cassette recorder. I recorded Mercutio's lines. Take this home. Listen to it as many times as you can. Over the following weeks, Keanu spent every lunch period and many afternoons after school working with Bennett. Instead of focusing on reading the script, they talked about Mercutio's character, his loyalty, his wit, the way he used humor to mask deeper emotions. Feel the rhythm of the words, Bennett would say. Don't worry about getting every syllable perfect. Understand what Mercutio wants, what he fears, what drives him. Slowly, Keanu began to inhabit the character. The words that had once been such obstacles became vehicles for expression. Bennett taught him techniques to manage his dyslexia, colored overlays for reading, breaking down long passages into smaller chunks, focusing on the sounds rather than the sight of words. When casting was announced, Keanu couldn't believe his name was listed next to Mercutio. Some students whispered that it was favoritism, but Bennett ignored the gossip. You earned this, he told Keanu firmly. Now prove me right. Rehearsals were challenging. Keanu stumbled over lines, forgot blocking, and sometimes froze entirely when too many people were watching. But Bennett never lost patience. Remember, Keanu, you don't need to read the words perfectly to understand their meaning, Bennett told him after a particularly difficult rehearsal. You have a gift for understanding people. That's what makes a great actor. Those words became a lifeline for Keanu, something to hold on to when doubts crept in. As opening night approached, Keanu's confidence grew. He still struggled with reading, still felt out of place in most of his classes, but in the drama room he'd found somewhere he belonged. The night of the performance, Keanu peeked through the curtains at the packed auditorium. His stomach churned, with nerves. What if I forget everything? He whispered to Bennett, who was adjusting costumes backstage. Then you'll improvise, Bennett said calmly. Theater is alive, Keanu. It's not about perfection, it's about connection. Connect with the audience, make them believe, and they'll forgive any mistake. When Keanu stepped onto the stage for Mercutio's first scene, a strange calm settled over him. The words he'd practiced countless times flowed naturally. For his Queen Mab speech, he commanded the stage. bringing Shakespeare's language to life with an intensity that silenced the audience. After the final curtain call, amid the applause and congratulations, Keanu sought out Bennett. "Thank you," he said simply. Bennett shook his head. "Don't thank me. This was all you, Keanu. I just opened the door. You walk through it." 3 weeks later, Keanu was called to the principal's office. He sat outside, wondering what he'd done wrong this time. When he was finally allowed in, he was surprised to find Bennett there too, looking grim. "Keanu," the principal began, "Mr. Bennett has shared his concerns about your academic difficulties. Based on his observations, we've arranged for you to be tested for learning disabilities." The test confirmed what Bennett had suspected. Keanu had dyslexia. The diagnosis was both a relief and a burden. It explained so much about his struggles, but it didn't solve them. "What happens now?" Keanu asked Bennett as they left the meeting. "Now, we fight for accommodations, extra time on tests, alternative assignments. It won't make everything easy, but it might make things fair." Despite the diagnosis and Bennett's advocacy, school remained a battleground for Keanu. Some teachers were understanding, adapting their methods to accommodate his learning style. Others viewed his dyslexia as an excuse, pushing him harder as if sheer effort could rewire his brain. Through it all, the drama room remained a sanctuary. Bennett continued to mentor him, challenging him with increasingly complex roles while providing the support he needed to succeed. "You're not defined by what you can't do," Bennett would remind him. "Focus on what you can do and do it brilliantly." Those words would stay with Keanu long after he left Etobicoke, long after he made the difficult decision to leave school entirely to pursue acting professionally. They would echo in his mind during countless auditions, rejections, and eventually, successes. Years later, when interviewers asked about his early influences, Keanu would think of Bennett, the teacher who saw potential where others saw only problems, who taught him that his differences could become his greatest strengths. The teacher who showed him how to transform limitation into art. The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of the drama room as Thomas Bennett erased yesterday's blocking notes from the blackboard. The school was quiet this early, just how he liked it. A peaceful hour before the halls filled with teenage energy. He turned at the sound of a gentle knock to find Keanu standing in the doorway, script in hand. "You're here early," Bennett said, checking his watch. "It's not even 7 yet," Keanu shrugged. "Couldn't sleep, been thinking about this scene." He held up his well-worn copy of Romeo and Juliet, pages dog-eared and marked with colorful tabs. "The duel?" Bennett asked, setting down the eraser. "Yeah. I keep getting stuck on the transition from joking to serious. Mercutio starts out teasing, but then—" Keanu frowned, searching for words. "But then the wound is deeper than he expected." Bennett finished for him. "And pride won't let him admit it." "Exactly." Keanu entered the room, dropping his backpack on a chair. "Can we work on it?" Bennett nodded, hiding his smile. Most students avoided extra rehearsals, but not Keanu. Despite his struggles with reading, or perhaps because of them, he worked harder than anyone Bennett had taught in years. "Let's try something different today," Bennett said, moving to the center of the room. "Put the script away." Keanu looked uncertain but tucked the script into his back pocket. "Now tell me about a time when you joked about something that was actually hurting you." Keanu went still, his face carefully blank. "Why?" "Because that's Mercutio in that moment. He's using humor to mask pain, physical and emotional. It's a defense mechanism many of us use." For a long moment, Bennett thought Keanu might refuse. Then the boy's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Last year at my old school, there was this reading contest. We had to read books and write reports. The person with the most points got a prize." Keanu paused, his eyes fixed on some distant memory. "Everyone knew I was terrible at reading, but the teacher made me participate anyway." Bennett waited, giving him space to continue. "I tried, you know. I really did. But after 2 weeks, most kids had finished 3 or 4 books. I was still struggling through the first chapter of mine." Keanu's voice was matter-of-fact, but Bennett could hear the lingering hurt. When the teacher posted the progress chart, I had the lowest score by far. Some kids laughed. What did you do? I laughed too. Made jokes about how I was saving all my reading energy for something good. Said books were boring anyway. Keanu's mouth twisted in a half-smile. I acted like I didn't care, like it was my choice to be last, but it wasn't. Bennett nodded. And how did you feel inside while you were making those jokes? Like I wanted to disappear. Like something was wrong with me that could never be fixed. Keanu's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. Mostly, I felt alone. That's Mercutio, Bennett said softly. The jokes, the wild stories, the exaggerated gestures, their armor. And when Tybalt's blade finds the gap in that armor, he stepped closer to Keanu. Let's try the scene again. No script. Just remember what that moment felt like. What followed was a transformation. Keanu's Mercutio came alive with newfound depth. The famous line, "A plague on both your houses," emerged not as a theatrical curse but as the raw, desperate cry of a young man whose protective mask had been shattered. When they finished, both student and teacher were silent for a long moment. That, Bennett finally said, is what I've been trying to get you to find. Not the words on the page, but the truth behind them. Keanu nodded, somewhat dazed by the intensity of what he'd just experienced. It felt different. That's because you weren't acting, Bennett explained. You were being. There's a world of difference. That breakthrough morning marked a turning point in their work together. Bennett's teaching methods evolved beyond simple accommodations for Keanu's dyslexia. He began developing exercises designed to bypass text entirely, focusing instead on emotional authenticity and physical expression. Acting isn't about memorizing words, Bennett would say during their sessions. It's about honest human connection. The greatest technical skill means nothing if the audience doesn't believe you. He taught Keanu to observe people, how a nervous student might fidget with their pencil, how the cafeteria worker's smile changed when she thought no one was looking, how the basketball coach's confident stride faltered slightly when he passed the trophy case displaying last year's championship loss. Every person carries a story in their body, Bennett explained as they watched students cross the courtyard during lunch. Learn to read those stories, and you'll never run out of material. For Keanu, who had spent years struggling to read words, on a page the idea that he could excel at reading people was revolutionary. The world suddenly contained a library accessible to him, one filled with subtle gestures, unconscious habits, and unspoken emotions. Their after-school sessions expanded beyond the requirements of the school play. Bennett introduced Keanu to acting exercises developed by Stanislavski, Meisner, and other theatrical innovators. They explored sense memory, emotional recall, and improvisation techniques that would later become foundational to Keanu's acting approach. These tools aren't shortcuts, Bennett cautioned. They're pathways to truth. Use them to find your way into a character, but never to fake an emotion. As the weeks passed, other students began to notice the special attention Bennett gave to Keanu. Some whispered about favoritism, especially after Keanu's performance as Mercutio earned praise from local critics who attended the school production. He's not even that good at reading, one student complained loudly after rehearsal. He just gets special treatment because he's Mr. Bennett's project. Bennett overheard, but said nothing, choosing instead to address it privately with Keanu later. Does it bother you? He asked. What they're saying? Keanu considered this, then shook his head. Not really. They don't understand what it's like. What's like? To have words fight you every day. To know you're not stupid but feel stupid all the time. Keanu looked up, meeting Bennett's eyes directly. They don't know what it's like to finally find something you might be good at. Bennett nodded, struck by the maturity in the observation. Just remember, their opinions aren't facts. The only judge that matters is the one inside you, and even that one gets it wrong sometimes. As the school year progressed, Keanu's confidence grew, not just in drama but in his other classes as well. The techniques Bennett taught him for memorizing lines proved useful for retaining information in history and science. His improved public speaking skills made oral presentations less terrifying. Even his English grades showed marginal improvement, as Bennett helped him find alternative ways to engage with literature. "Mrs. Winters actually smiled at me yesterday," Keanu reported with mock astonishment. "I think she's finally decided I'm not completely hopeless." Bennett laughed. High praise indeed from the dragon lady of the English department. Their work together extended beyond school boundaries. Bennett introduced Keanu to local theater groups and helped him prepare for his first professional auditions. When Keanu landed a small role in a community theater production, Bennett attended every performance, offering detailed notes afterward. "You're rushing the emotional transitions," he told Keanu candidly after one show. "Give the audience time to follow your journey. Don't be afraid of silence, it's often more powerful than words." Keanu absorbed these lessons eagerly, hungry for knowledge that might help him build a future beyond the classroom where he'd struggled for so long. Acting offered him more than an escape. It provided a language he could finally speak fluently. One rainy afternoon, as they worked on a monologue for an upcoming audition, Keanu asked the question that had been on his mind for months. "Why did you pick me, out of all the students who might have been easier to teach?" Bennett set down the script he'd been annotating. "Who says you were difficult to teach?" "Come on," Keanu snorted. "I can barely read, I ask too many questions, and I argue with you all the time." "You mean you challenge me to be a better teacher?" Bennett countered. "To find new approaches when the old ones don't work? To remember why I chose this profession in the first place?" Keanu looked skeptical. "The truth is, Keanu, teaching you has made me a better teacher for all my students." Bennett leaned forward in his chair. "Before you came along, I'd fallen into routines. The same plays, the same exercises, the same expectations. You forced me to innovate, to really see my students as individuals rather than interchangeable performers. So I was like, 'Homework for you?'" Keanu asked, with a hint of his characteristic dry humor. Bennett laughed. "More like a wake-up call. Teaching should never be comfortable. The moment it becomes routine is the moment it stops being effective." As the end of the school year approached, Bennett noticed Keanu becoming increasingly withdrawn during their sessions. His focus wandered, his responses grew shorter, and the spark that had characterized their work seemed dimmed. After a particularly distracted rehearsal, Bennett confronted him directly. "What's going on with you lately? You're here, but you're not present." Keanu stared at the floor, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "My mom's moving again to another city." The words hung heavy in the air between them. "When?" Bennett asked quietly. "End of June, right after school finishes." Keanu's voice was flat, as if he'd deliberately drained it of emotion. "We're going to New York. She got a job designing costumes for some off-Broadway shows." Bennett absorbed this news with a sinking feeling. He'd known, of course, that their work together would eventually end. Students graduated, moved on, but he hadn't expected it so soon, not when Keanu was just beginning to flourish. "That could be good for your acting," Bennett said carefully. "New York has amazing opportunities." "I don't want to go," Keanu interrupted, finally looking up. "I finally found something that makes sense to me here, and now I have to leave it behind." The raw frustration in his voice struck Bennett deeply. How many times had this boy been uprooted just as he was putting down roots? How many fresh starts had he been forced to make? "Listen to me," Bennett said firmly. "What you've learned here doesn't stay behind when you leave this room. It goes with you. The skills, the techniques, the way of seeing the world, those are yours now." "But who's going to help me keep learning?" Keanu asked, the question painfully direct. "Who's going to see what I can do instead of what I can't?" Bennett took a deep breath. "That's the hardest lesson, Keanu. At some point, you have to become your own teacher. You have to learn to see yourself clearly, to push yourself further, to believe in your abilities even when no one else does." "I don't know if I can do that," Keanu admitted. "Of course you can. You've been doing it your whole life." Bennett crossed the room to where Keanu stood. "Every time you picked yourself up after failing, every time you tried again despite the odds, every time you refused to accept the limits others placed on you, That was you teaching yourself the most important lesson of all: persistence. Keanu considered this, his expression thoughtful. I still wish we had more time. So do I, Bennett agreed. But we'll make the most of what we have left. In their remaining weeks together, Bennett poured everything he could into Keanu's training. He connected him with theater contacts in New York, wrote letters of recommendation to acting schools and workshops, and compiled a comprehensive set of exercises and techniques for Keanu to continue his development independently. On their last day together, Bennett handed Keanu a worn, leather journal. "What's this?" Keanu asked, turning it over in his hands. "A place for you to record your observations about people, characters, emotions, anything that might inform your acting." Bennett tapped the cover. "I've been keeping journals like this since I was about your age. They're my most valuable resource as both an actor and a teacher." Keanu opened it to find the first few pages already filled with Bennett's neat handwriting, notes about Keanu's progress, strengths, and areas for continued development. "I know reading isn't your favorite thing," Bennett said with a small smile, "but I thought you might make an exception for this." Keanu nodded, too moved to speak immediately. Finally, he managed, "I'll write in it every day." "Good. And one more thing." Bennett reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a cassette tape. "Some final thoughts and exercises, for when you need a refresher." As they said their goodbyes, Bennett offered one last piece of advice. "Remember, Keanu, acting isn't about becoming someone else. It's about finding the truth in yourself that connects to the truth in the character. Never lose sight of that connection." Keanu nodded solemnly. "I won't forget." "I know you won't," Bennett replied. "Now go show New York what you can do." After Keanu left, Bennett sat alone in the empty drama room, surrounded by the ghosts of scenes practiced and breakthroughs achieved. Teaching was always like this, investing completely in students only to send them off into the world, hoping the seeds planted would continue to grow beyond your sight. Some students faded from memory quickly. Others, like Keanu, left an indelible mark. Bennett had a feeling this particular student might go further than either of them could imagine. He tidied his desk, preparing for summer break, and wondered if their paths would cross again someday. Whatever happened, he was grateful for the time they'd had, for the opportunity to guide a struggling student toward discovering his own unique gifts. Little did Bennett know that this was just the beginning of Keanu Reeves's journey, and that their brief time together had helped lay the foundation for one of Hollywood's most enduring and beloved careers. The sleek glass and steel offices of Tonight with Dale Morgan hummed with the controlled chaos that preceded every episode. In a corner office overlooking the Los Angeles skyline, Dale Morgan himself sat across from his executive producer, Lisa Chen, reviewing segment ideas for the upcoming week. "We need something special for next Thursday," Lisa said, tapping her tablet screen. "Keanu Reeves will be here promoting the 4th installment of his action franchise, and we want more than just the standard interview." Dale nodded, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Agreed. Everyone's already heard the training stories, the motorcycle collection, the same old questions about sequels. We need a fresh angle." "What about his background?" "Everyone knows he's this incredibly nice guy, but where did that come from? Who shaped him before he was famous?" Lisa suggested, leaning forward. "We've never really heard much about his early influences." "That's because he rarely talks about his personal life," Dale pointed out. "Keanu's notoriously private." "Exactly. What makes it compelling television if we can pull it off?" Lisa countered. "I've assigned Olivia to dig deeper. Childhood, education, early career influences. Maybe there's someone from his past we could surprise him with." Dale's eyebrows shot up. "A reunion? That could work if we find the right person, someone meaningful but not too personal. We don't want to make him uncomfortable." "Absolutely," Lisa agreed. "Someone professional who helped shape his career, not an ex or family member. Let me see what Olivia comes up with." 3 floors below, in a cramped research office lined with filing cabinets and computer monitors, Olivia Parker was already deep into her assignment. Her desk was covered with printouts of old interviews, sticky notes, and several empty coffee cups. "Anything useful?" asked Miguel, another researcher who shared the space. Maybe, Olivia replied without looking up from her screen. I keep finding references to Keanu's educational struggles. Did you know he attended 4 different high schools and never graduated? Really? Mr. Hollywood A-lister is a high school dropout. Apparently he had undiagnosed dyslexia and really struggled with traditional education, Olivia explained. But here's the interesting part. In a few older interviews, he mentions a drama teacher who saw something in him that others missed. Miguel rolled his chair closer. Do you have a name? Not yet, Olivia admitted. The references are vague. Just things like my teacher showed me that my differences could be strengths, or one teacher changed how I saw myself. Could be just generic gratitude, Miguel suggested. You know how celebrities like to credit some nameless mentor for their success. Maybe, Olivia conceded. But there's something specific about the way he mentions acting techniques this person taught him. Listen to this quote from 1992. My teacher showed me that acting isn't about perfection, it's about honesty. That lesson has guided my entire approach. Worth following up on, Miguel agreed. How will you track down the actual person? Olivia sighed, gesturing at her intimidating to-do list. Start with his school records, I guess. Contact the administrations of the schools he attended. See if any drama teachers from that era are still around. Needle in a haystack, Miguel commented. Good luck with that. For the next 3 days, Olivia pursued every lead she could find. She called school administrators, scoured yearbooks, and contacted Keanu's former classmates through social media. Most pathways led to dead ends or vague recollections. He was quiet, one former classmate recalled. Kept to himself mostly. I think he was in some play, but I don't remember details. On the 4th day, just as Olivia was about to give up, she received an email response from the current drama teacher at Etobicoke School of the Arts in Toronto. Regarding your inquiry about Keanu Reeves, it read, you might want to contact Thomas Bennett. He taught drama here during the early 1980s and worked closely with Keanu on a production of Romeo and Juliet. I believe he retired about 10 years ago. I don't have current contact information, but our alumni office might. Olivia felt a surge of excitement as she forwarded the email to Lisa. Within hours, the production team had located an address and phone number for Thomas Bennett, now 73 and living in a coastal town in Oregon. When Lisa called him, Bennett was initially hesitant. Yes, I remember Keanu, he confirmed after Lisa introduced herself. Bright boy. Very determined despite his challenges. Mr. Bennett, we're doing a special segment on Mr. Reeves's career, focusing on early influences, Lisa explained. Several sources indicated you might have played a significant role in his development as an actor. A chuckle came through the phone line. That's flattering, but I was just doing my job. Keanu did all the real work himself. Would you be willing to participate in our show? Share some of your memories of working with him? It would be a surprise. For Keanu during his interview, there was a long pause. I don't know, Bennett finally said. It's been nearly 40 years. He might not even remember me clearly. Based on our research, I believe he does, Lisa assured him. He's referenced your teaching methods in several interviews, though not always by name. Has he? Bennett sounded genuinely surprised. Well, that's unexpected. We could fly you to Los Angeles, put you up in a nice hotel. You wouldn't have to appear live if that makes you uncomfortable. We could pre-record your segment. Bennett sighed. Let me think about it. This isn't something I ever expected. Of course, Lisa replied, sensing his reluctance. Take your time. But I should mention that the show tapes next Thursday. After the call ended, Bennett sat on his porch overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watching waves crash against the rocky shoreline while memories washed over him. Had he really made such an impression on Keanu? Enough that the actor still mentioned his teachings decades later? Inside his modest home, shelves lined with books on theater, and education testified to a lifetime dedicated to teaching. Since retiring, Bennett had kept busy with community theater and occasional guest lectures at the local community college. His life was quiet, purposeful, and private, very different from the celebrity world Keanu inhabited. That evening, Bennett pulled an old photo album from his bookshelf. Tucked between pages of family vacations and graduation ceremonies was a yellowed newspaper clipping, a review of Etobicoke's production of Romeo and Juliet. The grainy photo showed a teenage Keanu as Mercutio, caught mid-gesture with an intensity that jumped off the page. The review praised his surprisingly nuanced performance that transformed a supporting role into a scene-stealing tour de force. Bennett smiled at the memory. Keanu had worked so hard for that performance, pushing through his reading difficulties with sheer determination. What would he be like now after all these years of fame and success? Would he remember their after-school sessions, the techniques they'd developed together to work around his dyslexia? The next morning, Bennett called Lisa back. "I'll do it," he said simply. "But I'd prefer a pre-recorded message. I don't want to hijack his interview or make him uncomfortable." "Wonderful," Lisa exclaimed. "We can arrange for a camera crew to come to you, or if you prefer, fly you here a few days early to record at our studio." Bennett considered the options. "I'll come there," he decided. "If I'm going to do this, I might as well do it properly." The following Tuesday, Bennett found himself in a black town car heading from LAX to a downtown hotel. Los Angeles had changed enormously since his last visit decades ago. Taller buildings, more traffic, an energy that was both exhilarating and exhausting. At the hotel, he found a welcome basket waiting in his room with a note from Lisa. "Thank you for making this journey. Our car will pick you up tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the recording session. Please call if you need anything." Bennett spent the evening reviewing old teaching notes he'd brought along, refreshing his memory about specific techniques he'd developed. For Keanu, he wanted to be accurate, to honor their work together without embellishment. The next morning, the same town car delivered him to the television studio. Lisa met him in the lobby, a tall woman with an efficient manner and kind eyes. "Mr. Bennett, thank you so much for coming," she said, shaking his hand warmly. "We're thrilled to have you participate." "Please, call me Thomas," he replied, looking around at the bustling activity. "This is quite an operation you have here." "Just wait until you see the main stage," Lisa said with a smile. "But first, let's get you to makeup, and then we'll record your segment in Studio B." Bennett followed her through a maze of corridors, passing crew members with headsets and performers reviewing scripts. Everything moved with purposeful energy, so different from the measured pace of his coastal retirement. In the makeup room, a cheerful young woman named Trisha worked quickly to prepare him for the cameras. "Just enough to keep the lights from washing you out," she explained as she applied foundation. "We want you to look natural." "At my age, natural might not be the best approach," Bennett joked, eyeing his reflection. Trisha laughed. "Trust me, you look great. Distinguished." After makeup, Lisa escorted him to a small studio where a simple setup awaited, a comfortable chair positioned before a neutral blue background. A young director named Jeff explained the process. "We'll record your message to Keanu, then edit. It's slightly for time if needed. Just speak naturally as if you're talking directly to him. If you stumble over words or want to restart, that's completely fine. We can do as many takes as necessary." Bennett nodded, suddenly feeling nervous. "What exactly should I say?" Lisa stepped forward. "Whatever feels authentic to you. Share memories of working with him, lessons you taught that might have stuck with him, the potential you saw. The goal is to remind him of a time before fame, when he was just discovering his talent." "And to make him cry on national television?" Bennett asked with a raised eyebrow. Lisa had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Emotional moments make for compelling television, but that's not the primary goal. We genuinely want to honor the people who helped shape him." Bennett considered this, then nodded. "All right, I'll do my best to be honest without being exploitative." Once the cameras were rolling, Bennett's nervousness faded. Decades of teaching had made him comfortable with public speaking, and the words came naturally as he recalled his time with young Keanu. "I remember a teenager who struggled mightily with traditional education but who observed the world with remarkable intensity," he began. "When most teachers saw only his difficulties, I noticed his gifts, his ability to physically embody emotions, his extraordinary empathy, his willingness to be vulnerable in service of authentic performance. Bennett spoke about their techniques for working around Keanu's dyslexia, the breakthrough moments in rehearsals, and the pride he felt watching Keanu transform challenges into strengths. You probably don't remember the nervous drama teacher who once told you that your greatest strength wasn't your ability to memorize lines, but your extraordinary capacity to understand people, Bennett said, looking directly into the camera. But I've never forgotten the student who taught me that great teaching isn't about forcing students into a predetermined mold. It's about recognizing and nurturing their unique gifts. When he finished, there was a moment of silence in the studio before Jeff called, "Cut! That was perfect, Mr. Bennett. Really beautiful." Lisa approached with misty eyes. "That was exactly what we hoped for. Thank you." After recording a few additional takes and some B-roll footage of Bennett looking at old photographs, the session concluded. As Bennett removed his makeup, Lisa explained the next steps. "Keanu will be on the show tomorrow evening. We'll play your message during the second segment of his interview. The episode airs next week." "Will I get to see him?" Bennett asked, surprised by his own eagerness. Lisa hesitated. "We hadn't planned on it, but would you like to? We could arrange for you to watch from backstage." Bennett considered the offer. Part of him wanted very much to see his former student, to witness firsthand the man he'd become. Another part feared disappointment. What if the genuine, hard-working boy he remembered had been replaced by Hollywood artifice? "Yes," he decided finally. "I think I would like that." "Excellent," Lisa said. "Then we'll see you tomorrow evening. The car will pick you up at 5 p.m. Back at his hotel, Bennett felt strangely energized by the day's activities. He wandered down to the hotel restaurant for dinner, observing his fellow diners with the people-watching habit he'd always encouraged in his students. So many stories in a single room. The anxious businessman checking his watch repeatedly, the couple leaning toward each other in intimate conversation, the solo traveler finding companionship in a book. He wondered if Keanu still practiced similar observation, still looked for the humanity in strangers that might inform his performances. He hoped so. The next evening, Bennett found himself in a small viewing room backstage at the Tonight with Dale Morgan studio. A large monitor showed the main stage where the show would soon begin taping, while smaller screens displayed various camera angles, and the green room where guests waited. Lisa popped in briefly to check on him. "Comfortable? Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you," Bennett assured her. "Just a bit nervous, which is silly at my age." "It's not silly at all," Lisa said kindly. "This is an unusual situation, but I think you'll be pleased with how it unfolds." On one of the smaller monitors, Bennett caught his first glimpse of Keanu arriving at the studio. Taller than Bennett remembered, with longer hair now flecked with gray, but still moving with the same deliberate grace. He was dressed casually in dark jeans and a blazer, nodding politely to crew members as a production assistant led him to the green room. "That's him," Bennett murmured, studying the man who had once been his student. "He looks solid. He's known for being one of the most genuine people in the industry," Lisa commented. "No entourage, no special demands, treats everyone with respect." Bennett felt a surge of pride at that. Perhaps some of those early lessons about human connection had indeed stayed with Keanu through the years. The studio lights dimmed, then brightened as the show began taping. Dale Morgan bounded onto the stage with characteristic energy, delivering his monologue to appreciative audience laughter. Bennett half listened, his attention focused on the green room monitor where Keanu waited, reviewing what appeared to be note cards. When Dale finally announced, "Our guest tonight needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway," the audience erupted in applause. Bennett watched as Keanu walked onto the stage, waving to the crowd with a slightly self-conscious smile. The first segment proceeded predictably. Questions about the new film, anecdotes about stunts and co-stars, gentle teasing about Keanu's reputation for philosophical musings. Bennett noted with interest how Keanu deflected praise to others, how he listened attentively to Dale's questions before answering thoughtfully. Then, as they returned from a commercial break, Dale's tone shifted. Keanu, you've had this remarkable career spanning decades now. We've talked a lot about your recent work, but I'd like to go back to the beginning for a moment. Before the fame, before Hollywood, what set you on this path? Keanu looked momentarily surprised by the change in direction but recovered quickly. Well, it wasn't a straight path, that's for sure. I struggled in school, moved around a lot. Traditional education wasn't really my thing. Because of dyslexia, right? Dale prompted. I believe that wasn't diagnosed until later. That's right, Keanu confirmed. I didn't know why reading was so difficult for me. Words would jump around on the page, made school pretty challenging. So how did you find your way to acting? Keanu's expression softened slightly. There was a teacher, he said, at one of my high schools in Toronto. He saw something in me that others didn't. Bennett felt his heart rate quicken as Dale asked, what did he see? That I could observe, Keanu replied, his voice thoughtful. That I paid attention to how people moved, how they expressed emotions. He helped me understand that my struggles with reading didn't have to define me, that I had other ways of understanding the world that could actually benefit me as an actor. Dale nodded encouragingly. What was his name, this influential teacher? Mr. Bennett, Keanu said without hesitation. Thomas Bennett, drama department at Etobicoke. Bennett blinked rapidly, unexpectedly moved that Keanu remembered his name so readily. And what specifically did he teach you that stayed with you? Dale continued. That acting isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, Keanu quoted, unknowingly echoing Bennett's own words from decades earlier. That the connection with the audience matters more than technical flawlessness, and that what others might see as limitations can become strengths if you approach them creatively. Dale smiled. Those sound like valuable lessons that extend beyond acting. Absolutely, Keanu agreed. I've applied them throughout my life, not just in my career. Well, Dale said, leaning forward slightly, we have a surprise for you tonight. Your teacher, Mr. Bennett, recorded a message for you. Keanu's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. Really? You found him? We did, Dale confirmed. Would you like to see it? Yes, Keanu said immediately. Very much. As the studio lights dimmed and the screens prepared to play Bennett's message, the former teacher felt a sudden tightness in his chest. After all these years, his former student was about to hear his voice again, see his face. The circle was about to close in ways Bennett had never anticipated when he'd first noticed a struggling teenager trying to blend into the background of his drama class. On the monitor, Bennett could see Keanu's profile as he turned toward the main screen, his expression a mixture of curiosity and something that looked remarkably like hope. The studio lights dimmed as the large screen behind Dale Morgan's desk illuminated with Thomas Bennett's face. The audience quieted, sensing they were about to witness something genuine in an industry often criticized for manufactured moments. From his vantage point backstage, Bennett watched Keanu's reaction on the monitor. The actor had shifted forward, in his chair, his usual laid-back posture replaced with alert attention. Hello, Keanu. Bennett's recorded voice began, his tone warm but slightly hesitant. You probably don't remember the nervous drama teacher who once told you that your greatest strength wasn't your ability to memorize lines, but your extraordinary capacity to understand people. On screen, Keanu nodded almost imperceptibly, his eyes never leaving Bennett's image. It's been nearly 40 years since you walked into my classroom at Etobicoke, a quiet teenager trying so hard not to be noticed. I remember how you struggled with Shakespeare's text but came alive when we discussed the character's motivations and emotions. Bennett's recorded self paused, smiling slightly at the memory. You know, I still tell the story of how we developed alternative approaches to help you work around your dyslexia, how we recorded lines on cassette tapes so you could learn by ear rather than sight, how you created physical gestures to anchor emotional transitions when the text became overwhelming. In the monitor showing Keanu, Bennett could see a flicker of surprise cross the actor's face, perhaps at the specific details Bennett still recalled after so many years. What you may not know, the recording continued, is that your struggles taught me more about teaching than any course ever could. You showed me that true education isn't about forcing every student into the same mold, but about recognizing and nurturing their unique gifts. The camera cut to Keanu, whose composed expression had softened noticeably. He swallowed once, then again, his eyes never leaving the screen. I remember the breakthrough moment during rehearsals for Romeo and Juliet, Bennett continued. You were struggling with Mercutio's famous Queen Mab speech, all those complex words and images. We'd been working for weeks with limited progress, and you were becoming frustrated. Keanu's lips parted slightly, as if he too was recalling that difficult period. Instead of forcing the text, we took a different approach. I asked you to forget the words temporarily and just tell me what Mercutio was feeling in that moment. And suddenly, everything changed. You spoke with such clarity about Mercutio's use of humor as armor, his fear of vulnerability, his desperate desire to protect Romeo from pain he couldn't articulate. Bennett's recorded image leaned forward, his expression earnest. When you returned to Shakespeare's words after that, they weren't obstacles anymore. They were vehicles for the emotional truth you'd already understood. That day, you taught me that sometimes we need to approach challenges sideways rather than head-on. The audience sat in rapt silence, many of them seeing a different side of the action star they'd known primarily through his roles. Dale Morgan remained quiet, understanding that this moment belonged to Keanu and his former teacher. I've followed your career over the years, the recording continued. Through the early comedies, the action films, the indie dramas, I've watched you grow and evolve as an actor, taking risks and pushing boundaries. And while I can't claim credit for your success, Eli, that belongs entirely to your talent and determination, I hope that perhaps some small seed planted during our time together helped along the way. Bennett's voice grew softer, more personal. There's something I never told you back then, something I should have. When you left Etobicoke to move yet again, I worried about you. Wondered if you'd find another teacher who would see beyond your struggles to recognize your potential. I needn't have worried. You became your own best teacher, something I always hoped my students would achieve. On screen, Keanu's composure wavered visibly. He blinked rapidly, his jaw tightening in the way people do when fighting emotion. I'm proud of you, Keanu, Bennett's recording said simply. Not because of your fame or success, but because you've remained true to the principles we discussed all those years ago. Your performances still carry that fundamental honesty we worked so hard to achieve. You still approach characters with empathy rather than judgment. And from what I've heard, you still treat everyone around you with the same respect and kindness you showed in my classroom. The recording paused, Bennett gathering his thoughts for his conclusion. Teaching is an act of faith. You plant seeds without knowing if they'll grow, nurture potential you may never see fulfilled. Thank you for being one of those rare confirmations that the work matters. That seeing a student clearly, treating them with dignity, and believing in their capabilities can indeed make a difference. As the screen faded to black, the studio remained silent for a long moment. The camera held steady on Keanu, who sat completely still, his eyes suspiciously bright under the studio lights. Dale finally broke the silence gently. That was Thomas Bennett, your drama teacher from Etobicoke School of the Arts. Quite a memory he has. Keanu nodded, visibly collecting himself before speaking. Yes, he managed, his voice slightly rough. Incredible memory. His words clearly meant a lot to you, Dale observed. Keanu took a deep breath. Mr. Bennett saw me when I felt invisible, he said simply. He didn't try to fix me. He showed me how to use what others saw as weaknesses and transform them into strengths. In the viewing room backstage, Bennett felt a tightness in his chest at hearing his former student's words. Had he really had such an impact? Memory was a tricky thing. Perhaps they both remembered their time together through the softening lens of nostalgia. On stage, Dale was treading carefully, respecting Keanu's visible emotion while keeping the interview moving. Those are powerful lessons for anyone, not just actors. Absolutely, Keanu agreed, seeming grateful for the slight shift away from his personal reaction. That's what great teachers do. They don't just teach their subject. They teach you how to navigate life. Dale nodded thoughtfully. I understand Mr. Bennett developed special techniques to help with your dyslexia. Did those continue to help throughout your career? Keanu's expression lightened slightly as he moved into more comfortable territory. Many of them, yes. I still use some of the memorization techniques he taught me. Scripts can be challenging. Lots of text, constant revisions. His methods for breaking down dialogue into emotional beats rather than just words made a huge difference. Any specific examples you can share? Dale prompted. Well, Keanu considered, for complex scenes, I still create a physical map of the emotional journey, actual gestures or movements that anchor different emotional states. It helps me maintain consistency through multiple takes without getting lost in the technical aspects. That sounds like a very embodied approach to acting. It is, Keanu agreed. Mr. Bennett understood that I learned better through movement and emotion than through text. He'd have me physically act out concepts I couldn't easily grasp from reading. It made abstract ideas concrete. Dale nodded, then transitioned smoothly. We've been talking about the impact Mr. Bennett had on you, but I'm curious, have you had opportunities to play that role for others? To be the person who sees potential others might miss? Keanu seemed to consider this carefully. I try, he said finally, especially with younger actors or stunt performers who might be intimidated on set. Everyone deserves to be seen and heard, to have their contributions valued. In the backstage viewing room, Bennett smiled at this response. It suggested Keanu had internalized not just specific techniques, but the underlying philosophy of respect and dignity that Bennett had tried to model in his teaching. Well, Dale said, glancing off stage briefly, we have one more surprise for you tonight. Keanu raised his eyebrows questioningly. Thomas Bennett isn't just sending a video message, Dale revealed. He's actually here in the studio. The audience erupted in surprised applause as Keanu's expression transformed from composure to genuine shock. He's here? Now? Would you like to meet him? Dale asked, though the answer was already clear from Keanu's reaction. Yes, Keanu said immediately, standing up. Absolutely. Lisa appeared in the viewing room doorway. Thomas, are you ready to go out? Bennett nodded, suddenly feeling nervous despite his decades of theatrical experience. This wasn't a performance. It was real life, unscripted and unpredictable as Lisa led him through the backstage area toward the set. Bennett could hear Dale explaining to the audience that this reunion was completely unplanned from Keanu's perspective. This is not rehearsed, folks. They haven't seen each other in nearly 40 years. Bennett paused just off camera, taking a steadying breath. Then, at the production assistant's signal, he walked onto the brightly lit stage. The audience applauded, enthusiastically, but Bennett barely registered the sound. His attention was entirely focused on Keanu, who had risen from his chair and was moving toward him with long strides. For a suspended moment, Bennett wondered if there would be awkwardness. After all, they were essentially strangers now, connected only by memories from decades ago. But Keanu didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and embraced his former teacher warmly, genuinely, without the artificial enthusiasm that characterized so many television moments. Mr. Bennett, Keanu said when they finally separated, his voice thick with emotion. I can't believe you're here. Hello, Keanu, Bennett replied, studying the face of the man who had once been his student. The teenage angularity had matured into defined features, the uncertain expressions replaced with a centered calm. But the eyes were the same, observant, thoughtful, kinder than necessary in a hard world. Dale gestured them both to the seating area where an extra chair had been brought out. As they settled in, Bennett noticed Keanu surreptitiously wiping at the corner of his eye, a gesture so quick and subtle that the cameras likely missed it. This is quite the reunion, Dale said, smiling at them both. Thomas, when our producers contacted you about appearing on the show, what was your reaction? Bennett chuckled. Disbelief primarily. I'm long retired, living a quiet life. The last thing I expected was a call from a major television show asking about a student from 4 decades ago. And yet you remembered Keanu quite clearly, Dale observed. Some students stay with you, Bennett replied simply. The ones who challenge you to be a better teacher, who make you question your assumptions and methods. He glanced at Keanu. The Ones who show remarkable courage in the face of obstacles. Keanu shook his head slightly. I was just trying to survive school. With remarkable grace, considering the circumstances, Bennett countered. Moving between schools constantly, struggling, with undiagnosed dyslexia, facing teachers who mistook learning differences for lack of intelligence or effort. Not all teachers, Keanu said meaningfully, looking directly at Bennett. Dale, sensing the emotional current between them, asked, Keanu, what's the most important lesson you learned from Mr. Bennett? Keanu considered this for a moment. That limitations can become doorways to new possibilities, he said finally. When traditional approaches didn't work for me, Mr. Bennett didn't lower his expectations. He found different pathways to meet them. That changed everything for me. It wasn't just about acting techniques. It was about approaching life's challenges creatively, rather than surrendering to them. Bennett felt a surge of emotion at hearing his former student articulate this philosophy so clearly. I think you would have found your way eventually, he said. You had that determination from the beginning? Maybe, Keanu acknowledged. But having someone believe in you when you're young and struggling, that accelerates the process considerably. Dale turned to Bennett. What do you remember most vividly about teaching Keanu? Bennett smiled, memories flooding back. His persistence. We'd work on techniques to help with his reading challenges, and some would fail completely. But he never became discouraged. He'd just say, okay, that didn't work. What else can we try? He looked at Keanu. Do you remember the color overlays? Keanu laughed, a genuine sound that crinkled the corners of his eyes. The transparent, colored sheets? Yes. We tried every color in the rainbow to see if any would help the words stop jumping around on the page. Did they work? Dale asked, clearly intrigued. Not even slightly, Keanu admitted. But it was worth trying. That's what I mean about persistence, Bennett said. Many students would have given up after the first few failures, decided that reading just wasn't for them. But Keanu kept showing up, kept trying new approaches. The conversation flowed naturally from there, moving between specific memories of their time together and broader reflections on education, acting, and perseverance. The audience remained engaged throughout, witnessing not a manufactured television moment but an authentic reconnection between two people who had impacted each other's lives in meaningful ways. As the segment neared its end, Dale asked one final question. Thomas, now that you've reconnected with Keanu after all these years, what would you want to say to him that you haven't had the chance to express yet? Bennett turned to face Keanu directly. I'd want to thank you, he said simply. Keanu looked surprised. Thank me? For what? For reminding a young teacher why he chose that profession in the first place, Bennett explained. I was only a few years into my career when you came into my classroom. I was still finding my way, still figuring out what kind of teacher I wanted to be. Bennett's voice grew more reflective. Working with you, seeing how the right approach could unlock potential that others had missed, that shaped my entire teaching philosophy moving forward. For the next 30 years, whenever I encountered a student who didn't fit the conventional model, I remembered our work together and sought creative solutions rather than expecting the student to adapt to my methods. He smiled warmly at Keanu. So you see, while I may have helped you find your path as an actor, you helped me become the teacher I always hoped to be. It seems we're even. Keanu shook his head, visibly moved. Not even close to even, he said quietly. But thank you for saying that. Dale, recognizing the significance of the moment, wrapped up the segment with unusual gentleness. We need to take a break, but Thomas will stay with us. When we come back, we'll talk more about Keanu's new film and upcoming projects. As the cameras cut away and the studio lights brightened for the commercial break, Keanu turned to Bennett, seemingly oblivious to the busy set around them. I can't believe you're really here, he said, his voice low enough that only Bennett could hear. I've thought about looking you up so many times over the years, but life gets busy, Bennett finished for him. I understand completely. It was more than that, Keanu admitted. I worried that my memories had become idealized over time, that perhaps you wouldn't remember me as clearly as I remembered you. Bennett laughed softly. I assure you, you made quite an impression. Not many students argue with their teachers about Stanislavski's methods or insist on reblocking scenes to better serve the emotional arc. Keanu smiled at the memory. I was pretty stubborn. Determined, Bennett corrected. There's a difference. A production assistant approached, informing them they'd be back on air in 30 seconds. As the crew reset for the next segment, Bennett noticed Keanu discreetly wiping his eyes again. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Keanu nodded. More than all right, he said. Just full circle moments are rare in life. I'm grateful for this one. The red light on the camera illuminated and Dale's voice boomed out with renewed energy. Welcome back. We're here with Keanu Reeves and his former drama teacher, Thomas Bennett. As the interview continued, focusing now on Keanu's professional projects, Bennett observed his former student with quiet pride. The boy who had struggled so profoundly with traditional education had found his path after all, transforming challenges into a unique approach to his craft that millions now admired. In teaching, as in life, one never knew which seeds would take root, which casual comments might become foundational beliefs, which brief encounters might echo across decades. Sitting under the bright lights of a television studio, witnessing the man his student had become, Bennett felt the rare satisfaction of seeing the full circle of influence complete itself, not just in Keanu's career success, but in the fundamental decency and thoughtfulness he had carried with him from those early classroom days into the complicated world of fame. Some lessons, it seemed, transcended Shakespeare and stage directions, reaching into the very core of how one moved through the world. Those were the lessons that mattered most, the ones about persistence, about transforming limitations into strengths, about approaching life with honesty and empathy. As Bennett watched Keanu answer questions with thoughtful consideration, occasionally glancing over as if to ensure his teacher was still there, he reflected that perhaps this was the greatest reward of teaching. Not praise or recognition, but the simple knowledge that in some small way, you had helped a young person find their path forward, and sometimes, if you were very fortunate, they remembered to thank you for it, even decades later, even on national television, even with tears they tried to hide from the cameras. When the studio lights dimmed and the Tonight with Dale Morgan taping wrapped, Keanu Reeves and Thomas Bennett found themselves in the strange limbo that follows significant moments, that space where reality hasn't quite settled back into its normal patterns. Would you like to get a coffee? Keanu asked as they were escorted backstage. Or dinner, maybe? I'd love to talk more, away from the cameras. Bennett nodded, pleasantly surprised by the invitation. I'd like that very much. A production assistant approached with information about transportation and logistics, but Keanu gently waved her off. I'll take care of Mr. Bennett from here, he said with quiet authority. Thank you for everything today. After a brief stop in the green room to collect their belongings, they made their way through the studio's back entrance where a black SUV waited. Bennett noticed how Keanu navigated the space with practiced ease, familiar with the routines of celebrity while somehow remaining apart from them. Is this what fame is like? Bennett asked as they settled into the vehicle. Always having an escape route planned? Keanu smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. Something like that. You learn to move efficiently through spaces to anticipate where problems might arise. Like blocking a scene, Bennett observed. Exactly like that, Keanu agreed, looking pleased at the comparison. Life is choreography. I never thought about it that way, but you're right. The driver, a professional woman who introduced herself as Helen, asked for their destination. Somewhere quiet, Keanu requested, where we can talk without interruptions. He glanced at Bennett. Any preferences? Type of food? Atmosphere? I'm not particular, Bennett replied. Though after all those bright lights, somewhere with a bit of shadow might be nice, Keanu nodded understanding. I know just the place. As they drove through Los Angeles, Bennett watched the city transform outside the window. Glossy shopping districts giving way to quieter neighborhoods, palm trees silhouetted against the deepening twilight. Beside him, Keanu seemed content, With silence, his posture relaxed in a way it hadn't been under the studio lights. "You seem at home here," Bennett observed. "In Los Angeles, I mean." "It's been home base for a long time now," Keanu replied. "Though I'm away filming much of the year. Do you miss Toronto?" A thoughtful pause. "Sometimes. Especially in fall. Los Angeles doesn't really have seasons in the same way." The car eventually turned down a narrow street lined with small businesses and pulled up beside an unassuming restaurant, with a weathered wooden sign reading Marinos. No bright lights, no valet stand, nothing to suggest it might be a celebrity haunt. "The owner's an old friend," Keanu explained as they exited the vehicle. "Very discreet, excellent food, and they have a private room in the back." Inside, the restaurant was warm and inviting. Brick walls, wooden tables, soft lighting from iron chandeliers. A gray-haired man in his 60s emerged from behind the bar, his face lighting up at the sight of Keanu. "Twice in 1 month?" he exclaimed, embracing Keanu warmly. "To what do we owe this honor?" "Special occasion, Tony," Keanu replied, returning the embrace before turning to introduce Bennett. "This is Thomas Bennett, my drama teacher from high school. We just reconnected." After almost 40 years, Tony's eyebrows rose appreciatively as he shook Bennett's hand. "A teacher? Then you deserve our best table and our finest wine. On the house, of course." "That's not necessary," Bennett began, but Tony waved away his protest. "Any man who helped shape this one into the person he became deserves my gratitude," Tony insisted. "Come, the corner room is free." He led them through the main dining area, where several patrons glanced up with flickers of recognition, but respectfully returned to their meals, and into a small private dining space with a single table set for two. A window overlooked a tiny garden courtyard, strung with delicate white lights that reflected in the glass like earthbound stars. After they were seated and Tony had departed with promises of special treatment, Bennett looked around appreciatively. "Quite different from the school cafeteria where we used to talk about Stanislavski." Keanu laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. "Slightly better wine selection, too." A comfortable silence settled between them as a server brought water and bread, then discreetly withdrew. Bennett found himself studying Keanu's face, mapping the journey from teenager to adult, the defined jawline, the faint lines around his eyes, the composed expression that occasionally broke into unexpected warmth. "This is surreal," Bennett admitted finally. "I've seen you in films, of course, watched interviews occasionally. But sitting across from you now, I keep seeing glimpses of that 15-year-old who argued with me about whether Mercutio was secretly in love with Romeo. I still think the textual evidence supports it," Keanu replied with a half-smile. "And I still maintain you're overcomplicating a friendship," Bennett countered, falling easily into their old pattern of friendly debate. They both laughed, the years between them temporarily suspended. "Do you remember the cassette tapes?" Keanu asked suddenly. "The ones you recorded with my lines?" Bennett nodded. "Hours in my living room reading Shakespeare into a tape recorder. My wife thought I'd lost my mind. Those tapes changed everything. For me," Keanu said, his expression growing serious. "Being able to hear the words instead of struggling to read them, that's—" Martha's voice trailed off, her eyes widening in recognition. "Keanu Reeves," Harold finished for her, equally stunned. The manager nodded, clearly pleased to be delivering such surprising news. "Mr. Reeves has taken care of everything. He said it would be his honor." Harold felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief that their financial predicament had been resolved, gratitude for the unexpected kindness, but also a twinge of pride that made it difficult to accept such generosity from a stranger, even a famous one. "That's very kind," he said carefully. "But we couldn't possibly—" "I believe Mr. Reeves would be disappointed if you refused," the manager interrupted gently. "He specifically mentioned that he wanted to help celebrate your anniversary." Martha reached across the table to touch Harold's hand. "How did he know it was our anniversary?" The manager looked momentarily flustered. "I'm not sure, perhaps he overheard your conversation earlier." Harold's gaze returned to the actor sitting across the restaurant. Keanu Reeves wasn't looking their way anymore, seemingly intent on giving them privacy to process this unexpected turn of events. We should at least thank him properly, Martha said, her innate graciousness overcoming her surprise. Harold nodded in agreement. Yes, of course. The manager's smile brightened further. Actually, Mr. Reeves mentioned that he would be honored to join you for dessert if you would be comfortable with that. He said, and these are his exact words, I'd love to hear about 60 years of marriage. That's quite an achievement. Martha's face softened at this. Well, that's very thoughtful of him. Harold hesitated only briefly. The entire evening had already veered so far from their expectations that this additional surprise seemed almost fitting. We'd be delighted, he said finally. Excellent. Let me arrange a more suitable table immediately, the manager replied, practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of having a Hollywood star and an elderly couple sharing dessert in her establishment. As the manager hurried away, Harold and Martha were left alone for a moment to absorb this extraordinary development. Can you believe it? Martha whispered, her eyes bright with amazement. Keanu Reeves. The grandchildren are never going to believe this. Harold smiled, his earlier embarrassment fading in the face of Martha's delight. He seems like a kind man. The kids always said he was different from other Hollywood types. Remember when Thomas made us watch all those Matrix movies last Christmas? Martha said, referring to their oldest grandson. He'll be beside himself when we tell him. Harold chuckled softly. If we tell him. He might think his grandparents have finally lost their minds. Before Martha could respond, the manager returned, accompanied by Keanu Reeves himself. Up close, the actor was taller than Harold had expected, dressed simply but elegantly in dark clothes that helped him blend into the restaurant's dim atmosphere. His expression was warm and genuinely friendly, without the practiced charm that Harold associated with celebrities. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Keanu said, extending his hand first to Harold. I'm Keanu. It's a pleasure to meet you. Harold shook the offered hand, noting the firm but gentle grip that was careful not to aggravate his tremor. Harold Wilson. This is my wife, Martha. Thank you for your kindness, though it really wasn't necessary. Please call me Martha, Martha added, taking Keanu's hand in turn. Her cheeks were flushed with a youthful excitement that made Harold's heart swell with affection. The manager tells me you're celebrating 60 years of marriage today, Keanu said, genuine admiration in his voice. That's remarkable. Congratulations. Thank you, Martha replied. It doesn't feel like 60 years most days. Except when my joints act up, Harold quipped, earning a smile from both Martha and Keanu. The manager, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. If you'll follow me, I've arranged a special table for your dessert. They followed her through the restaurant, and Harold was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. This time, however, the attention felt entirely different. The same diners who had looked at them with pity or dismissal earlier were now watching with fascination and even a touch of envy. The manager led them to a quiet booth in a secluded corner of the restaurant, far superior to their original table, by the kitchen. As they settled in, an older server approached. Not Tyler from earlier, but a woman with kind eyes and gray hair peeking out from beneath her uniform cap. I'm Diane, and I'll be taking care of you, she said warmly. Can I start? You with some coffee or tea? They ordered coffee and Keanu requested water. As Diane moved away, a moment of awkward silence fell over the table. I hope I'm not intruding on your celebration, Keanu said, breaking the silence with genuine concern in his voice. Not at all, Martha assured him quickly. Though I must admit, we're a bit overwhelmed. It's not every day we have dinner with a movie star. Keanu smiled, a hint of self-deprecation in his expression. And it's not every day I get to meet a couple who've